Welcome to the first episode. So this is issue 6 of the Sandbox Weekly. So we started that 6 issues ago, so about 2 months, as a weekly email list to bring the latest industry news from a game developer perspective, looking at the sort of business and industry side. So less about what kind of games are coming out and whatever, and more about the issues facing the industry. We've had some really good ones, and then this last one was happening sort of over Christmas, and we were going to post it, and I was like, you know what, why don't we wait and move it to a day where I can get Ross to join me. So we've got Ross Hersemann here, who's the founder and I don't know what you consider yourself. I wrote lead, I don't know, lead principal, president, CEO of Loading Law.
That works for me. Yes, hi. Hello, Internet. Hello, interwebs. So I'm Ross Hersemann, founder of Loading Law, and let's get into it, Chris. What's the subject for today?
So the reason I decided to push this back, because we were normally releasing our emails on Friday, and actually I should make sure that ours went out this morning. Oh, if I switch screens, it messes up. That's great. That's great. Oh, well. As long as you can get the sound, I guess. It does not look like the thing went out, so I'm going to do that too while we talk. Oh, man, the world. I think I'm... send time, edit send time, send now, save. Apologies, I was working on it this morning, and I think I made a boo-boo. All right, now we are sending out this week's Sandbox Weekly. We moved it so that we could discuss because we started seeing a trend, and unfortunately it was not a positive trend, but it was a trend around a bunch of layoffs and reductions in forces in the industry. So we had quite a few articles about it in this week's Sandbox Weekly. So we had the Unity layoffs, the Amazon layoffs, as well as there's some other ones, and then we had a nice little spicy one with the SAG-AFTRA AI deal. So that started to kind of you can see my little put on your face there. That started to open the question, like maybe we should start our talk show and have a discussion. So it says Ross has double audio a bit. I'm not quite sure how to solve that problem. Yeah, Ross, why don't you talk for a second?
Let's see. What would they say double audio is all about?
Yeah, that I don't know.
Double-shooting. Just making sure I'm only using one microphone and not two.
Yes, I don't know if it's an OBS issue or not, but as long as it's not too bad, then I guess we'll just keep on ticking.
We'll do what we can here.
Yeah, why don't you just say something for like 5 seconds?
Sure. So as far as I can tell here, I'm only using one microphone, but I've been wrong before, so I'm going to see if I'm using two by mistake here. Hopefully not.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely hear it. I'm wondering what that's... I'm not hearing it through Discord, though, so that's the interesting thing. Which means maybe I've got something else going on. Talk again just for a second.
Say things. So when Chris and I were first getting started here, we were talking about some of the games that we're playing lately. And I was saying I am still spending a lot of time in Deep Rock Galactic, but... lately, it's been a lot of Sonic Superstars as well. I think I might be one of the few people.
Okay, I think I got it.
All right.
Sweet. It's the internet. Yep, there we go. Okay, cool. This is a professional endeavor we're going over here. So anyway, I wanted to bring you in because, first of all, you're a lawyer man. And you do all that law talk and stuff. And then also, you and I have been in this industry for quite a while, over a decade, and we've seen trends come and go. We've seen companies come and go. And then Also, now we've got new tech like AI coming in, which just seems to be exacerbating this potential problem. And I also, both you and I, are teachers. So we have a lot of students that are wanting to get into the industry, that are interested in learning about how to be involved in the industry. And so I think seeing these kind of things, particularly if you're in college, probably gives you pause on, do I want to be in this industry if they're going through these major cuts? So that's why I decided to do this first show and to bring you on. And then we can also take questions from the audience or whatever. So I've let my students know about the stream. Hopefully some of them join. And we will go from there. So, pumpkin. Oh, my God. I can't get a moment's. I should say hi to. I've got baby girl right here. Just taking a little nappers on my lap here.
Best co-host ever.
Okay, so I think why don't we just start with the big one? Whether it's the big one or not, I will consider it the big one. But let's just talk about Unity. So Unity said recently they're going to lay off 1,800 employees, which represents about 25% of their staff. So that is a big, big thing. Now, they've also mentioned, I believe, that we had that big issue with their runtime fee that they were implementing. I would say that was like October, maybe, of last year.
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the developers kind of felt like that was BS. So I guess just for set the stage, I don't know if you want to talk about the runtime fee on that, just to kind of give an overview of where that is.
It's so much of what we're going to talk about today is just the ebbs and flows of the game industry, from layoffs to corporate earnings and everything in between. And I know, my students probably share a lot of the same concerns that yours have, which is we're teaching them a toolkit of skills to prepare them for the next career that they're going to have. I was going to say the next 5 to 10 years, but the next 20 or 30 years for most of them. And a lot of them are trying to make that determination early on. Do we spend our time learning Unity, or do we spend it on Unreal, or do we go into a more open source kind of option? And the issue with Unity is it's kind of cast the shadow of doubt over the longevity of the platform. If they're going to be changing their revenue models, if they're going to be changing the viability of this platform as something that's profitable for indies at indie scales, it's definitely given a lot of my students a lot of pause, and it's raised the question within my department of, do we continue teaching Unity if this is going to potentially not be around the same way that we've liked it to be? So just to kind of catch up for those in the know, Unity's been changing its pricing structure in a way that's drastically going to affect indies. And they've dialed a lot of that back since October. I always have to check back in and see what the latest status of it is. But there's been a lot of turnover at high levels, and now, of course, this round of layoffs. So it's, I hate to say it's going to be kind of a wait and see thing, but for the time being, it's definitely raising a lot of eyebrows on my end.
Yeah. So personally, I think the runtime thing is, to be blunt, kind of bullshit. I think if you are paying for a tool, then build the cost into the tool, and then whatever you build with the tool, I compare it to like Photoshop. Like Adobe doesn't charge me every time I post a photo onto Instagram or something, right? I use the tool, I make the thing with the tool, and then I take the thing and I do whatever I want with it afterwards, right? Black & Decker isn't charging you for every time you use your electric drill. Though we are starting to get into real sketchy territory with printers these days and these subscription model nonsense. But yeah, life is a service, right? But so that definitely rubbed people the wrong way. But it is obvious that Unity is in a tough spot. I think a lot of these companies too, and we can talk about this, over the past 2-3 years, before we started seeing inflation, which is kind of a result of what's been going on, money was pretty cheap. You could get loans, particularly if you were a well-credited business, you could get loans for next to no interest. And I think a lot of people took advantage of that and started scaling up in a way that did not serve them in the long run. And I think that Unity is probably one of those companies that just scaled too fast, made some acquisitions they didn't need to do. You see this a lot. There's some companies in Columbus, these big unicorns that are kind of floundering now because of that. But the unfortunate side effect, or the reality, is that 1,800 people are going to lose their jobs because of it, right? Mm-hmm. Because of poor management. And you mentioned something which I think we're all going through. So as a small business owner, we're deciding, do we even want to be a Unity shop? We predominantly use Unity for our projects. And now we're like, well, should we go to Unreal? And I don't like Unreal. I don't trust Epic as far as I can throw them. You know, they claim to be fighting for the little guy, but come on. But I mean, we have to.
Well, what I love is the buzzword that I keep seeing, like in all the public facing statements that I've seen from Twitch, from Unity, from almost all of these corporations that are announcing these large scale layoffs, is I keep seeing the buzzword right size and everything. We've got to right size our corporation. And it's a cute word because it seems to absolve themselves of any kind of liability. I think the general market trend, I don't think the boards and CEOs of these companies are twirling their mustaches eagerly and greedily trying to lay off their workforces for better quarter four profits. But I do think what we're seeing is a market correction here, in the sense that a lot of companies just overhired during the pandemic, and they were far more optimistic about sustainable growth based on trends at the time, and reality is not catching up to our fantasy as much. So this is kind of a harsh reality check that a lot of companies are having to downsize or right size, scale back their workforces because certain industries maybe weren't panning out, certain investments aren't working out, and because of how insular this industry is, things that affect there's any number of market factors that are causing this. But to your point of, what does this mean for the next couple of years, and what does it mean for studios trying to decide which horse to hitch their wagon to? It's a hard decision, and in a ecosystem where there aren't as many viable alternatives, the two names we always hear is Unity and Unreal. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to see some new things, some new challengers entering the fight, but I think it's going to be a while before they get their seat at the table. So it's kind of a very flexy time right now.
Yeah, there's a comment in our Twitch chat about seeing people moving to Godot. Houdini's another one. Jonathan Blow is still working on his platform. I should have done a quick search. I should have texted him or something to see where that's at. But there are alternatives. It's just a shame because some of those alternatives, not saying that they can't improve in the future, but some of those alternatives just don't have some of the feature sets that you really would want. And Unity has matured. I mean, we were using Unity way back in the 2.0 version, and it was clunky as all get out. And they've made great strides, over the past decade. You would expect them to. And then, Unreal its claim to fame is that it was like a high-end AAA engine that they then began to create a more accessible framework platform, I guess, for indie devs. So, there are options. My worry is that, and we're kind of getting off the topic of the layoffs here, but more towards platform stuff. But my worry is that once you become so entrenched in a platform as a developer or a company, it becomes really hard to get out of it, no matter how bad it might be, right? Like we are firmly at Multivarious and GDEX. We are firmly in the Google ecosystem for things like Drive and Gmail and stuff, and we are firmly in Unity right now for a lot of stuff.
And if you decided to change that tomorrow, that would not be an easy transition. That would require new hardware on your end. That would require a lot of retraining for everyone. And there's always that grace period and that learning curve of trying to figure out what you used to do in that new platform. And
so that's kind of where my question is going. My discussion is that we might be seeing a sort of lag time between the people who are wanting to switch away from Unity to the actual implementation execution of it, just because it isn't like flipping a switch. You need to rebuild. If you're taking a game and moving it from Unity to Unreal, like that, depending on where you are in the process, that's a big rebuild. And so we may be seeing a 4, 6, 12-month lag time between when people are transitioning over. Then that being said, that opens up the other question, because Epic also did a round of layoffs last year. And so it's sort of this cycle. I think, call it right sizing, downsizing, whatever you want to call it. I do think that a lot of companies grew too fast, hired too much. The market always has a correction mechanism built into it. Like, it will never be completely stable. It will always ebb and flow, and downsizing and reductions are just an inherent part of it, because new technologies come along. The market functions on efficiencies, right? Like, that's the whole point, sort of, is you build these efficiencies into the system. Once you build those into the system, you need less people. Like, that's how it works, right?
And it's not as far as I've heard some folks call it planned obsolescence of workers and staff, and I don't think it works that way. But I think
I think that's a disingenuous use of the term.
Yeah, something I was discussing with my students. They were understandably very concerned about this round of layoffs and what it's going to mean for them going forward the next couple of years. And unfortunately, this is kind of a reality of any content-driven industry where you're making creative content with some regularity, is layoffs happen. Sometimes people are brought in to complete a project or reach a certain milestone, and then when that milestone is reached and that product is complete, it's time for them to go to their next project somewhere else. Studios are in a great degree a revolving door of talent, project to project, living milestone to milestone. And something that I use to kind of describe this is, you can look at the film industry and see how there's a lot of parallels between games and film. But a way that I describe this to my students is, if I was a general contractor and I hired a bunch of independent contractors to build the Brooklyn Bridge, when the bridge is done, I don't need to keep them on staff. It's time for them to go to other companies and build other bridges. The bridge is done. And I feel like for a lot of game studios, that's kind of how it works. And based on the success of that one game that you're building, that might greenlight your next game and the one after that. And if one game doesn't do well, it's time to close up shop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always this sort of insatiable urge to keep growing, right? To become bigger and bigger. And some studios don't do that. They create their product, and even if it's a big success, then they might grow a little bit, but they don't want to go from 25 people to 2,500 people, right? Like, it's a philosophy almost of the business, is they want to be in that space. But I think this is also, because I think you're correct. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that, right? Like, projects need certain people at certain times. Music composition is always a big one, right? Like, you generally don't need a full-time musical composer on staff through the entire 3 to 5 year duration of a project. And oftentimes when you're in pre-production or early design, you don't need your full developer load and whatnot. So, like, that all makes sense. But I'm beginning to see, and I'm curious your thoughts, it seems like this is just another march, or a larger march, maybe faster march, I don't know, some kind of march towards ultimately just a gig economy overall. I can't remember the data. I was listening to a show last week, and something mentioned, I'm going to be making up numbers here, so just it's roughly in the ballpark, right? But it was something like 19% in the 70s of workers were like these gig contractors, and now it's getting close to 50% of the workforce is considered this contractor worker, a 1099. We're seeing that in education, like universities and colleges are hiring almost exclusively adjuncts lately. And, that's great that gives, I'm an adjunct. It gives me an opportunity to teach, but I don't get the full salary or benefit loads associated. I'm teaching a full class load, and I teach a full class load generally every semester. And I have more or less for the past 9 years. And yet I don't get the full benefits. Now, there are certain things that, like, Ohio has. I don't know about Illinois, but Ohio, if you're a teacher at any of the universities, you're in the state's retirement system, no matter where you are. So we do get some retirement benefits and stuff. Um, but this march towards sort of gig employment and contractor employment does not seem to be abating, and I don't think it's going to get any better. And the core issue, particularly, we're talking from the United States here, is we do not have the social structure for people. So your health benefits are tied to employment, retirement benefits are tied to employment. Disability and workers' compensation is often tied to current or past employment. Um, so I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, we need to fix that. It's definitely a generational shift. I know my grandparents' generation definitely romanticized, getting that one job and keeping it for 30 years and retiring with a gold watch, with a paid-for house in the suburbs and a picket fence and 2 cars, and
Sure.
still having enough time to retire at 65 and do some traveling and everything else. And it does seem like that dream is getting farther and farther out of reach for millennials and zennials. And without having that infrastructure that you mentioned, without having healthcare, without having benefits, without having uh, those things independently of your job, people become increasingly dependent on their current employment for just their right to live. And it's one of the reasons that these layoffs are so concerning, is that we're not talking about independent contractors getting laid off at these businesses. We're talking about employees with benefits and
Yeah.
investment options. And there's not always somewhere to go because it's industry wide. If it's not that if Unity announces these layoffs that Unreal is going to pick up the slack and hire all of those workers tomorrow. It's not as simple as going across the street because maybe just the market can't support that many people. It's an interesting contrast though, because I think, and this is me speaking to American consumerism right now, but uh, it truly is a beast that cannot be fed. Americans are consuming media faster than ever before. We've never wanted more shows, more books, more movies, and we can't watch and consume this stuff fast enough. But somehow that is not matching or sustaining our production. We've never been producing more either, and it doesn't seem like these two things are in step. I feel like we can't watch TV shows fast enough, but we're laying off people, and you would think we would be hiring. You'd think the market for content creators would be booming, and it doesn't seem to be the case. So
Yeah.
there's a disconnect here.
That was a big thing that was brought up during the writers' strike
Hmm.
in the middle of last year. Again, I was listening to an interview, and they were mentioning that uh, the way that streaming functions. So this is in the TV and movie space, has just fundamentally disrupted how the concept of writing shows. So it used to be 70s, 80s, 90s, even 2000s. You would get hired on to be a writer of a show. That show would do 12 to 20 episodes, and that would be half a year of your employment, maybe more, depending on what you were doing. And the way that streaming functions, where you're doing 6 to 10 shows, they're all filmed generally at once, and then they're streamed in Netflix, they're all streamed at once. Um, that could be 4, 8, 12 weeks of your year. And then you're kind of stuck looking for something else to find to fill in the rest of that year. And it's becoming an issue within the writing world. And it's becoming an issue in the gaming space. Why don't we take a jump then to this SAG-AFTRA AI thing? I think at first I've read through it a few times to kind of get a gauge on what's actually being implemented, and it seems like they're attempting to have some semblance of control for voiceover actors, but the optics look awful, right? When you're just like, hey, we've got this new AI deal where companies can use actors' voices, and obviously the actor supposedly has to consent to it. But within this article, the GameSpot article we posted, there's several people, including Elias. I don't know how he says his last name. Tufix. He's the guy who does Adam Jensen and Deus Ex. He's got a really noticeable voice. But there's others who are like, nobody talked to me about this, right? Like, nobody was asking me about AI. So I guess real quick, just give us the answer to AI. Can you solve it for us real fast on stream?
I think that it's one of those things where a lot of it, you mentioned optics, a lot of this has to do with public perception, and a lot of it has to do with just people being paid fairly for what they do.
Sure.
Uh, I think the decision on AI is ultimately just going to come down to making sure we compensate and credit people fairly. That's what it's always about. Um, when I hear AI, I don't think of Terminators, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of artificial intelligence. I think of predictive texting. I think of a tool that's used to make our lives a little bit easier or to eliminate redundancies or monotonous tasks. I don't think that that is what voice acting is. I think that the kind of content creation that we need in the game industry, film industry, or otherwise, is personal. It's created by humans. You can't necessarily automate innovation. You can definitely automate imitation, which is what we're talking about here. So I don't think our AAA voice actors are the ones who are going to get hurt here. They're going to negotiate the deals that are going to ensure that they get paid and credited fairly forever. It's the little guy. It's the folks who don't have that kind of hustle, don't have that kind of pull, or that bargaining position to make sure they are getting fairly credited and compensated for things. So my solution to AI, we've got to work out the kinks first. And part of that is haggling a contract that closes open-ended doors that says, for 1 day of work, we're going to create a signature of your voice or of your likeness or of anything personal about you that's your livelihood and have the unrestricted right to milk that indefinitely. That's not going to work for
Hmm.
actors or studios in the long run. So I think this last year of negotiating has been all about closing that door and just making sure people get treated fairly.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a pretty pointed question here. Where do you come down on there has been a discussion, it happened a lot last year because of all the strikes, um, between that distinction between sort of creative artist and run of the mill crew member, right?
Mhm.
Why is it that actors get residuals and developers don't? You know,
Yeah.
um, and I think it's a very interesting conversation that's popping up where, um, in the voice acting world and gaming, it's been a little bit different, but it's definitely switched big time now because we're getting big time actors in. Nothing against video game actors. I think that there's great stuff happening in the video game space for sure. But when you pull in like I hate to say a Kevin Spacey or something, right? There's a set of expectations that come with that actor that
Hmm.
don't come from, let's say a Troy Baker when he was first starting Last of
Hmm.
Us, right? Like you mentioned leverage, like, you know, early stage Joel Troy Baker did not have the leverage that he has now. And I would be surprised if he has the leverage that like The Rock has, right?
Hmm.
Like if you're gonna get The
And that's
Rock.
the difference. It's all about, no pun intended, it's all about how much muscle you have. And I think this is a good thing, and there's gonna be some growing pains here. I think that folks working behind the scenes or working at a smaller scale, folks who aren't The Rock, are finally starting to get the visibility that they've never had. And I'm applying that to gaffers. I'm applying that to folks working behind the scenes in film and folks working behind the scenes in games. I think that gamers that cinephiles are starting to gain an appreciation of people who work behind the scenes in a way that they never have before. We all have access to Wikipedia and IMDb, and we can look up who directed something, who wrote something, who was a showrunner. There never used to be discussions about showrunners for TV
Oh,
shows
sure, yeah, totally.
the way that came to be a household conversation in regards to Game of Thrones or Last of Us or other
Well, I think that
big
really happened
successes.
with oh my god, what's his friggin' name? Who did all the reality shows? He does the New Year's Eve thing with Anderson Cooper. I'm blanking on his name. But he became a big one, and so did like Shonda Rhimes with like Grey's
Hmm.
Anatomy and stuff. You started to see these sort of powerhouse showrunners, and then yeah, you mentioned and HBO too. Like HBO really focuses
Hmm.
um, on that. Like that's an important aspect of their model is finding these people that create really good content, um, within the HBO silo, you know?
Yeah, and I think as those people become more visible, as we come to realize, like, oh, this is from the Duffer Brothers, we have an expectation of what they're going to bring to us. I think that is going to mean a better bargaining position for them in making sure they're taken care of and the people they work with is taken care of. And I hope that
Does that roll down though to the people on the team, you think?
I hope so, but I doubt it. I wish that stuntmen got credited. I wish that we had Oscars for stunts, and there never have been. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
these are the unsung heroes of the industry, and I don't know if people just have an easier time connecting with the on-screen talent, but it's the people behind the scenes, whether it's in film or in games, who give it the quality that it has. People, your average film appreciator, your average fan of a franchise will definitely remember their favorite special effect, or they'll remember their favorite line. They're not going to know the stand-up comedian who ghost wrote the punch up that made that joke in that movie. They're not going to know the VFX artist who put together that effect they love so much. They're going to know that J.J. Abrams put some lens flare in their favorite movie, but they're not going to know the people who really did every little thing behind the scenes. So I'm not sure everything's going to filter down to everyone who deserves their fair credit, but it never does.
Well, that's a good point that tethers back to your comment about, I forget how you phrased it, but like voice acting, like impersonating or whatever the word you used was. Because you hear time and time again all those like great moments in TV, like Tears in the Rain on Blade Runner, right? Like Rutger Hauer just made that up. That Tears in the Rain speech. And Bill Murray is notorious for having like these moments where he just kind of ad-libbed or whatever. You're not going to get that with AI. AI is not going to ad-lib, right? It will do what a computer does, which is it will do the thing you tell it to do. It'll say the words you tell it to say in the intonations you tell it to use. But you're not going to get any of those creative collisions. You're not going to get any of those moments where somebody does something and you're like, let's do that again. That's really interesting. And I think even directors and creatives who are very, like, for example, I know Christopher Nolan's very tight, but Aaron Sorkin, very like plotted out. Quentin Tarantino tends to be very plotted out. But they all let the actors take a stab at stuff, because that's how you get those little memorable moments. You can't write it all down on paper when you're sitting there. AI is not going to give you that, right?
No,
like, it's just not going to. I share that. I do hope that this carries down. I do think that there should be some kind of system, whether you want to unionize it or whatever. I think unions are positive in certain ways and can be negative in others. But as a general rule, I think you can do some interesting stuff with collective bargaining. But you can look at. I always think of like Clint Eastwood. I mean, we're talking back in the '70s here, and I know Clint Eastwood's kind of lost his mind a little bit here and there over the past couple of years, but he tended to work on his movies with the same people, the same cast, the same crew. He would bring in new folks. He'd bring in younger folks. He tended to bring in a lot of minorities that their first acting role, maybe not their first acting role, but their first like major role in a film would be on a Clint Eastwood movie. And so that would sort of provide that door for others I'm starting to see that nowadays too. It seems like more and more, maybe it's because of the nature of the commodification of media, that there's just so much stuff being produced that people are maybe coming down to smaller groups and working together on a lot of stuff over and over again. You see the same director and same actors doing stuff.
When it works, it works. I mean, Adam Sandler has made $4 billion at the box office doing that.
Oh,
he's got
yeah.
He's got his set crew of friends, and he's got the machine works. It's reliably what you're getting and who you're working with, and it's just a streamlined process. So I see no reason why that can't be applied to games. But in terms of AI, I still think you need that little human X factor to get some true innovation.
Yeah.
I think AI is great at imitating things, and can be a great tool for that work that we don't necessarily need. But
So let me ask you a question on the
Hmm.
legal side here. I did not talk about this in the blog post, mostly because I don't think it's fleshed out enough, and I'm not sort of on the ball. But the Biden administration has been working on redefining, and in cases not even redefining, but sort of like sticking to the definitions of what's considered an employee versus a contractor, because that has become um, a lot of the gray area around that has allowed larger companies, like we talked about earlier, to just hire people as contractors when they really should be considered employees. Um, do you have any insight or thoughts on that, and sort of the legal end of that? If those rules do end up changing, that could reclassify a pretty sizable amount of our workforce from contractor into employee.
A where do we even start with that? It could break the system we have right now, and that might be the best thing that ever happens to us. I mean, when you take a look at the big picture goals of this administration, or uh, anyone taking a look at how we compensate people for the time that they spend, you have to find what fits best. And I mean, a lot of this just comes down to healthcare. I never thought healthcare would be so impactful in creative processes like the game industry.
Oh, absolutely.
But you mentioned earlier we were talking about universities hiring adjuncts over assistant professors or full-time professors, and I can speak to this as well as a fellow adjunct. Um, I don't think there's that much of a difference between being an adjunct and being an assistant professor in terms of your day-to-day work. You go to class, you lecture, you lesson plan, you grade, you come back, and it seems an arbitrary distinction between um, someone who's doing it part-time or full-time when you're carrying a full class load, as so many adjuncts do.
Yeah.
It's
I let me just jump in because that was one of the things that maybe I was a little bit of a pain in the ass. And obviously, I rework my curriculum and everything, but I made it very clear to where I work at Columbus State that as an adjunct, I am not going to rework and revamp your curriculum. If you want to use my curriculum and pay me for that, that's one thing. If you want to pay me to create curriculum for you, that's one thing. So I am using their curriculum, and then over time I adjust it. So in essence, I've over the past 9 years I've rebuilt it. So I guess maybe they won in the end, but that was something where I was just, for me, that felt like a distinction between what a full time faculty should be doing and an adjunct should be doing. Now, maybe I may not be right on that, but that's just kind of where I drew the line a little bit.
And it's a hard line to draw. To your point about, what is this going to mean for the game industry, and what are these distinctions between employee and independent contractor going to mean? I think we might see more layoffs, we might see more transitions, because I think a lot of businesses don't have the margins to support transitioning 50% of their independent contractor staff over to full-time employees. They don't have it
Yeah.
in their war chest to be paying benefits and insurance for those folks, and they probably don't have the hours to be
Yeah.
paying those people.
It's
So
a
I think
complicated
that's
process. Like as soon
Mhm.
as the difference between as a small business, so um, we everybody that's on the team now at like their full time capacity is a part owner of the company, and so that's a little bit different a conversation. But one of the first things I did before I hired anyone 12 years ago was make sure that we had benefits,
Mhm.
so that people that came on could do it. But there is a big difference in running a company that has no employees to a company that has one employee, like a real employee classified as an employee. That now you got to start talking about benefits. Now you got to start filing unemployment insurance. Tax obligations change, overhead changes. It's a big deal. It's a big
Yeah.
difference.
And I think that AAA studios will survive.
Yeah, they're
But
already set up
for
for it. That's
smaller
the thing.
businesses, they're not set up. For your average indie studio that might have 2 to 5 founding members and might contract out, 60% of their work to 30 independent contractors. If all of a sudden they had to transition those people to meet minimum wage or to file for unemployment and everything else that you mentioned, that's going to break a lot of profit margins. That's going to make a lot of games not financially viable anymore, because they're
Sure.
What do you do to compensate for that? You have to lift the price on something. So your game that might have been very competitively priced at $12.99, if you're raising that to $18.99, you just priced yourself out of your competition. Folks, consumers aren't going to bear that cost, because something I've noticed about consumers of content, increasingly people don't like paying for stuff. People don't like paying
Yeah.
$60 for games. They certainly don't want to pay more than $60 for games, even at a AAA level. They hate paying for DLC. They don't like paying for skins. Um,
Well, I think they just hate paying for
they
stuff.
still do. They never.
Yeah.
We have never sold more DLC than at any other time in human history. But people sure don't like.
Yeah. I'm a big
They don't like
fan,
it.
or a big believer. I think you should price yourself and your products for what they're worth. I think we have a tendency to undercut ourselves, whether that's an hourly rate when you're talking compensation or a product. Now, of course, you got to do your market analysis. You got to look at the market trends. You can't just be like, I'm worth $300 an hour, and I graduated high school. Like maybe you are, but there's very few people. There's very few Mr. Beasts in the world or whatever.
Well, it's hard, and you have to have a good understanding of your consumer base and what they want and what it's worth to them. And you can
Sure.
look at examples in film. I need to pull actual numbers for this, but I was taking a look yesterday at some of the greatest successes and some of the greatest flops in film and TV streaming recently. And one of the biggest successes of last year was the Barbie movie, which did
Hmm.
very, very well.
Totally.
And one of the more ignored TV series that had come out on Disney Plus was She-Hulk, and She-Hulk cost more to make than Barbie. So you can look at how much something costs versus what it earns, and you can't always predict that, but it's a lesson that's very
Yeah, I think
it's
Marvel's
it's
kind of
hard to learn.
lost their mind a little bit on their expectations versus budget, but we could talk a whole another hour on that. Disney and Marvel. No, I agree. So we're getting a little tight on time, and I like to.
Hmm.
We've been talking about the dour news, right? So I like to end on positive stuff. So I'm gonna pull up my thing if I can find it. Got too many windows. So part of the blog post that I wrote for this week around these things was like, you keep hearing all this bad news, all this rough stuff, and then you have to ask yourself, well, what do I do, right? Um, got this 4K TV, I can't read, or monitor, I can't read anything on it. It's too small for my eyeballs. Um, so I went through and let me list a couple things, and you can kind of respond and give your thoughts if that sounds good, right?
Let's
Ending
do it.
on a positive. So the first thing I mention is you're really not in control of anything. I think the sooner we as individuals, as people, realize that you actually have very little, very, very, very little control over anything in your life, um, then that's good. Now, it seems scary at first. It's pretty terrifying when you're just like, oh my God, well, I don't control anything. What do I do here, right? But once you sort of make that a part of your brain space, you can start focusing on the things you can control. And once you get through your sort of initial existential crisis, you can start to realize that like you don't need to worry about those things. You literally can't do anything about them, so don't worry about them. So in the case of what we're talking about here with firings and layoffs and stuff, I've been reductioned and forced before. It sucks. You can't really do anything. So we're gonna talk here about, like, let's just say, how can you set yourself up in a way that will, if these things were to happen to you, you are in a good space. So here's the things that you can control. So the first that I have, my first bullet point, and this is silly, but I think it's one of those things everybody should do, but nobody does, including me. I need to do it, but keep your resume and CV updated regularly. Like, just always make sure that your CV and your resume are up to date with all the stuff you've been working on. I think it's smart to create a resume that I have it on Google Drive. I think mine's like 12 or 13 pages of just like all of the crap I'm involved in, right? I am never going to send that resume to somebody in that state. I'm never going to send a 13-page resume to somebody, but at least I'm keeping tabs on everything. Ross, is your resume up to date?
Is it up to date? No, it's not. See, I need this channel too. I need to follow this advice. I give advice more often than I take it.
Yeah.
So that's a good first step because you don't know when you're going to need it at a moment's notice, and you don't know when an opportunity is going to come at you.
Yep.
There have been plenty of times where something came up very surprisingly, and someone said, "Send me your CV," and it was a crap, moment where you have to scramble and do it. So
Yep.
good advice. Keep it updated.
And then you got to go back and be like, oh my god, what were the dates? Who was my boss when I was doing this thing?
Uh-huh.
And it's just a pain. And I write down like all the talks I attend and stuff as well. So anyway, the next one, and this one I think all these are kind of no brainers, but I just wanted to get them in front of you. Always be developing your skills and keep them current. Like I think that you should always be learning things. Just because you're at school, just because you have a job, does not mean you should be stopping your educational journey. And when you have time, if you can fit in half an hour, it doesn't have to be a lot, half an hour a week, right? Like I'm taking guitar lessons right now. I play at my lesson for an hour, and then maybe I practice 1 or 2 days, 30 minutes. But there's weeks. Like I have my lesson today, this afternoon. I haven't practiced since my last lesson, right? But at least I'm trying to learn some new skills, right? So the more you can broaden out your skill set, the more effective you will be on the job you currently have. But then I also think it makes you a more competitive employee, a competitive get in the future if something was to happen. So Ross, is there a new skill you'd like to get this year?
I think I finally need to take the plunge on Duolingo.
Mm.
That
For
bird is
what language?
really getting out there. Italian for me was what I always wanted
Italiano.
to learn. That was
Molto
yes.
bello.
Something that was always on my to-do list that I never found the time for, and it's something I absolutely should be adding to my toolkit because why not? It's never been easier to do. And to your point of folks just building out their skills, do it and do it in interesting, diverse ways. I had a student who said they wanted to be a writer, and they asked me how do I how do what
Mm-hmm.
happens next, and they're singularly focused on being a narrative designer for games, and it's like you can't just narrow the scope, broaden your scope, learn how to write for comics, learn how to write for television, write short stories for your local newspaper writing competition, and just keep expanding that skill set in weird ways. Any number of those experiences might make you uniquely qualified for something else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Next up, attend game developer events as much as possible. I am a
Hmm.
big believer in just putting yourself out there, getting out there in the community. Um, I'm an introvert as much as the next guy. I love sitting on my couch with my dog in my lap, playing games or whatever. But opportunities don't really walk in your door like that, right? You have to put yourself in these places where these opportunities exist. And I think one of the things that people need to sort of realize is that this whole thing is a marathon, right? Your career is going to be a long time. It's going to represent most likely the largest sort of section of your life. Uh, and it's going to take time to do things. It's going to take 2 or 3 years to develop anything that's worth developing, and that includes your network. And we'll talk about the network in a second here. But I think you should attend local and free events regularly, not just when you need something. So Columbus, Ohio, where we are, we have a great local group called COG, COGG. So it's thecog.com. I would put money on wherever you live, there is some sort of local game dev community or software community. And if there isn't one for video games, maybe there's one for board games, or maybe there's one for stuff like role-playing games or D&D or something. Some way you can get ingratiated with different people. And maybe if there isn't one, maybe you make one, right? Look up the IGDA. Ross, you've been a part of the IGDA for a long time, helping them out, the International Game Developers Association. Maybe there's a local chapter near you that you could be involved in. So that's something to look at. And then attend larger national events selectively to broaden your network. I say selectively because they are expensive. So, going to GDC, for example, I think can be an awesome experience, but you're not going to leave out of there for less than like 3 to 5 grand. So, it's going to be pricey. Uh, we just happen to have one here in the Midwest called GDEX, which takes place in Columbus. We released the The dates, October 25th through the 27th of 2024. We just released those yesterday. So if you're watching, you're interested, the GDEX, GDEX.com. You can check that out. But attend some of these larger events. I can't tell you, and Ross, I'm sure you second me here, but being in a place where you are surrounded by people who get it is amazing. When you go to gaming events and you can make some like stupid ass game reference, or you're talking about something in the game space, whether it's developer wise or game playing wise. I mean, even before we started this show, we were just sort of chatting about what games we were playing and stuff, right? Like, I don't know about you, but my day to day, I'm generally not surrounded by people who play games and view video games the way that I do. So I don't know about you, Ross, but
It's validating to find your people and be surrounded by them, and you really can't put a price on that. And the advantage of, look, we've all gotten a little bit feral after the pandemic, and my couch calls to me as well, and I feel that I do far more virtual networking and marketing than I ever have before, but you can't really quantify the value of being in person with other people and those spontaneous interactions that you have that only happen at in-person events like GDEX. Being somewhere, overhearing a group of people who share a perspective or a value that you have, and joining that conversation and seeing where it takes you, following someone at the end of a talk to the next talk or to the next room where it happens. And it's one of the most crucial parts of finding a community and integrating in one is showing up.
Yep. I one of the biggest things at GDEX, or like when I go to PAX, right? I generally don't, even GDC, I generally don't attend the sessions. I go to meet people and chat. You want to grab a coffee, grab lunch, get dinner, go to an after party or something. And I think that that's a really big part of going to, I mean, hell, like I work once a week at the local gym. I have like 5 jobs already, and I was like, I'm gonna go work at the gym just so I can get out of the office, because we closed our office during COVID, so I'm working from home. So it gives me a chance to go and meet people, and now I've become ingratiated in some different circles that I ordinarily would not have been, which is really really cool. So the next one here, this is one that sometimes I get eyebrows on, but like, invest a bit of money from every paycheck into one. So first of all, an emergency fund that can cover 3 to 6 months of your expenses if you do get laid off. And then 2, invest money from every paycheck into a free brokerage account. You should not be paying for investment accounts this day and age. So you want to use M1 Finance is what I use, or Robinhood, or Webull. There's others, but don't pay a broker, don't pay a financial person to do this. But just start building that money up, because whether you get reduction in force, or maybe you've just been doing something for 10 years and you're like, I want to go try something new, right? If you have a financial cushion, then that really removes the stress from you on making some of those life changes. So you want to have a cushion where you can weather those storms, because otherwise you're acting in survival mode. And as we all know, people don't make good decisions when you're in survival mode. So really, really invest. And it doesn't have to be a lot. If you could put in 50 or $100 a paycheck into something, it'll go a long way. But just make it a part of your habit. Before you buy anything else, before you go out to dinner, start throwing your money in. And I always say, just invest into a simple like S&P 500 index fund or a total market index fund. Don't buy individual stocks. My big favorites are VOO and VTI. You can look up those sticker tags, but those will give you a set of resources, not in a year, not in 2 years, but in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. If you start going from, let's say 22 years old to 42, if you'd been just putting in 50 to $100 a paycheck, so $100 to $200 a month, over the course of 20 years, man, that's going to give you quite a bit of money to have as a cushion. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Ross. I know investing and stuff is not generally something we think about as a part of our career, but
It's amazing how little money it takes to completely change your life. And that's what you're talking about. That incremental investment that you're mentioning just on a monthly basis of $50 to $100. That's going to add up to something at a point in time when you're going to need it. You're going to be at a very different stage of life in your early 40s as you were in your early 20s, and when you start considering about a all those change of life events, getting married, buying a house, changing careers, retraining, moving to a different state. The difference between being able to make that decision and not being able to make that decision and pull the trigger on it might be 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand. And that's what we're talking about is over time, that amount of money can completely change your circumstances. So give yourself that cushion and get started now. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, just as a little example here, if you started with $0 and you invested $100 a month every month for 20 years at a standard reasonable 8% rate, so that's even after inflation generally, if you look at stock market growth, that is $57,266 that you would have. That you could, most people could live on $57,000 for probably a year if you kept your expenses reasonable. So if you were just like, screw this, I'm done. I don't want to work anymore. I'm going to take a year off, or you get fired or whatever. So just something to keep in mind that I think is really important. And the vast majority of that comes from your interest. And if you were to just leave that around for another 20 years, it would grow into something pretty substantial. Just out of curiosity, I'm gonna do that. What would it grow if we did 40 years? Let's find out. We'll do it on the fly.
Chris is planning his retirement right now.
Oh, dude, I try to invest. I am actually personally, my goal is to be completely 100% debt free by my birthday in June. And I'm almost there. June, my June, let's see if I did this right. Yeah, beginning. So my June payment for my student loans will be my 120th payment, which will qualify me for student loan forgiveness.
Congratulations, Chris. That is a mountain we're all trying to climb.
As part of my public service loan forgiveness, because I work with Columbus State. So that's, just being open, I still owe $102,000 in student loans. So those will all disappear in June, hopefully. So anyway, if you went from the $100, just $100 a month after inflation, you would have $322,000.
That's a house. That's a fantastic nest egg.
Over 40 years, just $100 a month. Mm-hmm. So something to think about. All right. Then the next one, this is a big one. And it's funny, you can see my OBS captures my mouse, even if it's not on the screen. It's funny. Take your time to maintain your network through both the good and the bad times. Don't just reach out to people when you need something from them. Reach out to people regularly. Ross, I try to make sure, besides GDEX, you coming out to GDEX, I try to make sure I give you a call, every couple of months, if I haven't at least, so we can catch up. I've got other people that are sort of on my list. I just had a lunch with some local game dev folks. Just a small lunch, wasn't anything fancy. We had multivarious pay for it. I think, it ended up being like $80 for all of us. Very reasonable, but it gave us a chance to sit down and chat about stuff when we weren't worried about work and we weren't freaking out about something. So you need to build your network. You're creating a strong network of friends, of colleagues, of people who know you, they know your work, they know your work ethic, is going to be instrumental, because those are the people that, given the long run, once you start building your career, those are the folks that are going to find jobs for you as well. So if you end up getting let go, and then you can hit up your network and you're like, hey man, I just got let go from, Unity. We're picking on Unity a lot today, but wherever, those are the people that already know you, and they're going to be able to find ways to help you out, to connect you to other resources. Or, the Columbus State job, my teaching job, existed because the guy that I know, I'm good friends with, was he runs part of that program, and he was like, hey, one of the teachers is leaving, would you be interested in applying and maybe doing a test class? And I was like, sure. And that was almost 9 years ago. So and then make sure you share your appreciation of those relationships with the people in your networks, so that it feels like it's a a genuine connection, and it's not just something that you're trying to, get something out of someone every so often. So Ross, I consider you to be an integral part of my network, besides obviously a friend. But I think it's important to really cultivate those relationships.
It's very important. And something that I always try and stress to my students and new contacts as well is when you're doing your own networking, don't get too focused on climbing a ladder or trying to make those connections at the top. Like, almost more important is doing those lateral relationships and finding people at your own skill level, because as all of you rank up, you know, it's going to be far more beneficial because you're going to be able to connect with those people one on one far more easily than the CEO of your favorite company who's in a position to give
Absolutely.
you a job. Make those
Absolutely.
connections with people at your level, and then as all of you climb, everyone at your new status unlocked tier.
Yeah, absolutely. This idea that you always need to be connected to the quote unquote decision makers, I think is a fallacy. First of all, a lot of those CEOs just aren't going to have the time for you. They're busy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying in business which is like, if you want to get connected to the CEO, you don't go to the CEO, you go to the administrative assistant, right? You go to the secretary, the person that can get you in. And this is sort of different but similar in that sense where, to your point, we're all working together, we're all growing our career. I'm 42, you're a little younger than me, but we're part of I think this sort of generation that's kind of moving up in the I don't know, we're sort of the kids that grew up at the start of the video game industry and are now in the industry. Whereas the people that were making games when we were kids, there was no gaming industry when they were kids. They just sort of fell into it, and then we kind of fell into it. And now there's degree programs and all sorts of stuff. There's GDEXs and sandboxes and all sorts of stuff. None of that stuff existed when we were growing up, right? So we are moving up in that positive way for sure. And it's important to stay connected to those people. And you never know, like you might make some really good friends out of it. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so this is the last one. We've hit 11 o'clock, so we're running a little bit over. But I just wanted to sort of end on this last positive note, which is surround yourself with positive and supportive people that have your back when things are tough. There's this saying in the sort of productivity philosophy sphere, which is you're the average of the 5 people you hang around the most with. Hang around with people who are better than you at things, who are kind and supportive, who want to see you succeed. If your friends don't want to see you succeed, if every time you're trying to do something positive for yourself, they're giving you pushback, maybe you should find some new folks. Now, that's not being said like, because I do think it's the responsibility of a friend to push back on you if they think you're doing something dumb or making a mistake. But if it's a constant sort of set of criticism, that's a different story. So if you surround yourself with people that are really going to help you be the best you can be, that's going to go a long, long way. Multivarious, my company, GDEX, Sandbox, none of these things would exist if we didn't have the team that I have. Like, we're on year 12 with GDEX, and it's pretty much the same people that have been running it. I mean, hell, Katie, who's on now, I texted her last night. I was like, can you create an overlay for the show? Because we're going to do a show at 10 a.m. And she's like, I'm on it. And so she created the overlay that we're looking at right now. All the same while Tom is working on getting us ready for our big presentation that we're doing for Global Game Jam this afternoon. And Wes is on here as well, supporting us, and he's going to be doing a bunch of stuff with Global Game Jam. So, like, find a team where everybody can feel empowered and they can grab the reins on stuff. And I think you'd be very surprised about how effective it can make you as a person.
Well said.
Sweet. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up? Ross, I want to thank you for being on our first episode for issue 6 of the Sandbox Weekly.
My pleasure. It's always a blast. We've talked a lot about games today. We've talked a lot about the doom and gloom of an uncertain future. But remember, for everyone listening, remember why you care about this industry, and that's the games. So get out there and make a friend and play some games with some other folks. Make a friend, make a network.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Ross, for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. So on behalf of myself and baby girl here. She is not doing the cold. She does not like the cold at all. But yeah, I want to thank you all. The Sandbox Weekly. So if you go to the Sandbox.Space, you can sign up for the Sandbox Weekly email. We are releasing now every Wednesday at 10 a.m. A new issue, and then Wednesday at 10 a.m. we're also going to try to do a video episode. So I want to keep these kind of things going from week to week, where we can talk about the topics that are important to the industry. And just keep updated as well with GDEX. We're on the social medias at the GDEX because we're going to be releasing a lot of information on that. So I hope to either see you next week at the show, or maybe at GDEX, or maybe at many of the million other things that we are all involved in. But thank you so much for watching, and we will see you when we see you.